This morning, we announced a plan for fee-free higher education for students from poor and working class backgrounds. Education is one of the most important tasks of the country. As you know, in our 5 priorities, we made it priority number 1, because it is only when we solve the education problem in South Africa shall we change South Africa for real. The provision of free higher education and training for poor and working class students until the attainment of an undergraduate degree is a standing and binding solution of both the 52 and 53rd conferences of the African National Congress.
In 2017, former President Jacob Zuma made a surprise announcement that poor and middle-class students will be fully funded for university and college, much to the relief and excitement of young people who endeavored to enter an institution of higher learning. Almost 4 years later, students yet again back on the streets across South Africa in a bid to compel government to abide by its promise to provide free education and also clear historic debt. Given the current environment, especially on the back of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has further left the economy in tatters, is this feasible? With us this evening is the Deputy Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation, Buti Manamela. We're also joined by Rais Nwabay, who is the chairperson of the WITS Student Forum. He's also the former chairperson of Amnesty International. WITS, during the Fees Must Fall protest of 2015 and 2016. And Chris Nissan is a commissioner at the South African Human Rights Commission, will be joining us for this conversation, as well as Bongani Mahlangu, who is the NEC member of the South African Union of Students. Do join us for this conversation on social media using the hashtag Unfiltered. But first, let's take a listen to this clip.
Cabinet met yesterday and discussed the matter of the funding shortfall, which I had reported earlier in the week. And the particular issue under discussion was shortfall in the funding for the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, NSFAS, for 2021, which has delayed NSFAS in being able to communicate funding decisions to students and institutions for first-year students. Cabinet agreed that funding should be reprioritized from the budget of the Department of Higher Education and Training in order to ensure that all deserving NSFAS qualifying students are able to receive funding support for the 2021 academic year. Further reprioritization can only be considered as part of the medium-term budget process of government, which takes place later this year.
Well, that's the Minister of Higher Education. And next we speak to the Deputy Minister of Higher Education, who joins us for this conversation. Buti Manamela, good evening, Deputy Minister, and welcome to the show. Let's start off here. First of all, the Minister told us there is no money to fund NSFAS first-year students, and then the money was then available. Where did this money come from?
Thank you very much, Aldrin, and also to viewers. The discussions about augmenting funding to the National Student Financial Aid Scheme started immediately after the Minister of Finance announcement last year of the medium-term budget statement and the zero budgeting, because our projections showed that with the number of students who will be qualifying from grade 12 and want to be first-time entrance into universities and TVET colleges, that would result in a shortfall. So since then, we've been having discussions with Treasury to ensure that we avail the resources. Part of the constraints included the fact that we had to extend the academic year to March this year, and also the fact that we made an announcement around the provision of laptops and all of that. So all of this, had an impact. And so as part of the discussions with Treasury, we then agreed to reprioritize resources, the higher education and training budget from different other areas, with the understanding that, discussion will be ongoing so that in the immediate, we should be able to allow first-time entrants into universities and TVET colleges to register those who qualify and are academically deserving to be funded by the National Student Financial Aid Scheme.
Sure, but can you tell us where the money is coming from? Which parts of the higher education budget will have to nip it in the bud or try to make that belt a bit tighter to make sure that there is this augmented funds made available to NS first-year students?
Well, most of the resources came from the National Skills Fund, and some of the resources were mobilized from the sector education and training authorities, and also from our new generation, our NGAP program, which is a program to support particularly historically disadvantaged institutions. So those were the three areas, or some of the three major areas wherein we had to, in some instances, even institute 100% budget cut to reallocate those resources towards the National Student Financial Aid Scheme.
Does this mean that the subsidies that are meant for universities won't be cut?
Well, look, that's also an area wherein we are going to be cutting, that's in terms of the subsidies to universities.
Oh, so what does this then mean for the bigger picture? Because here we're speaking about universities that provide a service to students, but those universities are saying that if our subsidies are cut, that would mean that it will have an impact on our operations as universities.
Well, most definitely, but I think the situation that we find ourselves is that we have more than 150,000 students who want to enter a university and TVET colleges, and it is on the basis of this that we decided that in the immediate, let's do all this reprioritization, and subsequently we'll have to try and find money to support universities. And remember that the other pressure that most universities are faced with now, includes the student debt of students who are currently studying at these institutions, which is at the heart of the protests that we've been seeing from sometime last week, and which continue today as part of the national lockdown. So it's going to be, an uphill. But it also speaks to the fact that, given the pressures that we face as a country, we have to, relook at the way in which resources are redirected, particularly grant-based resources such as NSFAS, the social security grants and all of that, and as to what are our major national priorities and how do we direct resources towards those, because this will greatly affect, post-school education and training sector in the long term. And Cabinet has instructed our department and ministry to work on a strategy, a sustainable strategy for funding higher education, and in particular for student funding, and that report review needs to be submitted to the Cabinet within the next 3 months. And that's where we will be, trying to look at what are the immediate interventions that we need to be making, and also what are the long-term interventions that we need to be making.
Okay. Do you know, sorry, Deputy Minister, because I'm running out of time here, but do you know by how much those subsidies would be cut by? Or do you have a percentage at least?
Well, look, in the overall, all the reallocation amounted to 6.4 billion rands in total. I'm not sure offhand as to how much of that came out of the, the university grants. But importantly, the major contributor to the 6.4 billion rands came from the National Skills Fund.
Okay. Bongani Mahlangu, who's an NEC member of the South African Union of Students, also joining us for this conversation. Bongani, the Deputy Minister had a mouthful to say. Just quick, your response before we go to an ad break, and then we'll come back to this conversation.
No, thanks for the invitation. So the response is the department and government But the department, cabinet, treasurer, and everybody else should stop viewing the investment or spending into higher education, which they have defined as an apex priority of government, as consumption spending, but rather than investment spending. Because this perception, and the minister said it, that they categorize it the same as your grants, your social grants, whereas the social grants, if you look at the returns, the economic returns and the multipliers are not the same as what you would find in an investment in education. So in education, it must be seen as an investment, not as another form of consumption by government.
Just quickly, what's your take on the decision also to cut grants that are meant for universities?
That will affect the growth of universities' capacity qualitatively and quantitatively. And that goes against what was found or what was made as a recommendation in the Heha Commission in 2017 in August, which gave, in principle, we have summarized it to two things: administrative efficiency, that is policy stability, and increase of spending as a percentage of GDP to at least 1%.
Yep.
And we have seen an increase in 2017, because 2017, remember, there were no hikes in fees because government was able to cover the shortfall and students did not have to bear the brunt of that expense. So that was an injection, that was an increase in expenditure. We saw it in 2018, 2019, and then in 2020, August, we in the midterm budget policy statement.
Okay.
That's when we started seeing these decreases. And in 2021, we've seen these decreases. So now they are reversing these gains, whereas they actually have to be increasing because there's under expenditure as is.
Okay, so we're going to go to a quick ad break. When we come back, we continue the conversation around the cost of education, higher education that is, and also the confirmation about the cut to grants that are meant for universities, because Professor Bauer, who's the CEO of University South Africa, says that they fear that this would mean it could lead to job cuts within universities themselves. And welcome back to Unfiltered with me, Aldrin Sampier, as we focus on the national shutdown and student protests that have been taking place, focusing on the cost of higher education. And I've got various guests this evening. Right now, we'll be in conversation with Rais Noorbai, who is the chairperson of the Wits Forum. He's also former chairperson of Amnesty International, who joins us on the line. Rais, good evening. Welcome to the show. So what is your take on how the Higher Education Department has tried to augment, as the Deputy Minister has said, this shortfall that comes from NSFAS to try and make sure that first-year students have money that's made available for them to move into institutions?
Good evening. Thanks for having me. I think concerning this money that's being spent to cover the shortfall, it is ultimately a Band-Aid and a bullet wound. We have more and more students being turned away from the doors of higher education, despite the fact that we were promised free education at the end of 2017. During 2015 and 2016, we were told that we would have progressive introduction of free education as put forward in the South African Constitution, as put forward in the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. But like the hairline of the Wits VC, we are moving backwards. And so what we need to do now is we need to have a radical re-looking at the way in which subsidies are allocated. And we need to ask ourselves what our national priorities are. We spoke earlier about how we should see education as an investment in this country's future and also as a public good. And so the way in which our government makes policies needs to account for this. And the austerity budget is exactly the opposite of this.
Mm-hmm. What is that radical shift? What does it look like?
A radical shift to fee-free, decolonized higher education.
Yeah, but where does the money come from? How do you plug the hole? Like, for instance, now, with making money available for first-year NSFAS students, the department says that we didn't get any new money from Treasury, but rather we've been told to move our budgets around.
So let's talk about where Treasury has been spending money.
Yeah.
In 2020, Treasury spent approximately 187 billion rand bailing out state-owned enterprises. Treasury spent 128 billion rand bailing out Eskom. Treasury spent 10.5 billion rand bailing out SAA. At the moment, students in South Africa are drowning in debt. There's 13 billion rand of student debt across the country. And what we are saying clearly across the country, from SAUS, from the WITS SRC, from the UCT SRC, we are all saying clearly that what we want is for the government, as a first step towards free education, to clear historical debt. And we refuse to believe that it's not within the financial capacity of the state to bail out student debt when they have been spending orders of magnitude greater money on failing state-owned enterprises, on carbon criminals like Sasol and a failing airline like SAA.
Deputy Minister, why is it impossible for government to bail out students? All of those who have historical debt.
Sorry, are you posing
Deputy
that
Minister,
question
are
to
you
me?
there?
Yes, I'm here.
Sure. Why is it impossible for government to bail out students? As Marais points out, that government has been bailing out state-owned institutions and SOEs. Why can't you do it when it comes to students? And the point that Bongani made earlier on, that here we're speaking about an investment.
Well, I mean, I fully agree that this is education is an investment, and we have made the point that many economies all over the world, given the pandemic, but also given the post-global economic crisis situation, have basically prioritized education. And I think that we're hoping that with time, within overall government, we will begin to see victory towards that direction. But I think importantly, all those other services that Rais is mentioning are needed services. That's the second point. The third point, and very briefly, is that as is now, government is funding more than 60% of students who are going to our universities for free. We're also funding more than 95% of students who are going to TVET colleges for free. So we, are on that particular mission of providing progressively fee-free higher education to the poor.
But why can't you scrap why can't you scrap the historical debt? That is what led us to where we are at the moment. Sure, progress has been made to provide money, at least for students who come from poor families, from working class families, but those who are already in the system, who face historical debt, who can't register, who can't continue with their studies because of the blockage.
Well, unfortunately, with the pressures that has been faced by our national fiscus, it's not something that we're able to do. It is, yes, something that we've done in the past. I think, Minister Pando announced in 2017 more than 1.9 billion rand that was specifically meant to, deal with historical debt. But it is not something that we're able to do in this particular situation. And it's a discussion we're going to be having with the university vice chancellors and with the students' union in order to ensure that we come out of this emphasis on students who owe universities.
Okay, Commissioner at the Human Rights Commission, Chris Nissan, also joining us for this conversation. Commissioner Nissan, good evening and welcome to Unfiltered. Do you think the students have a leg to stand on when they argue and they say that education is a human right, therefore education must be made freely available?
Good evening to the viewers, and good evening to Aldrin and to Deputy Minister and all our colleagues there. Indeed, they have. You see, but the problem is that, the Department of Higher Education every year should look at the planning and the year ahead and look at the scenarios, the worst and best case scenarios, and look at that. And remember that every person that applies, every student that applies to enter into a university or college also have to apply for NSFAS. And so all the information is there. So my point is that if the students and if government has said that there will be free higher education, then there is no reason for them not to do the proper planning. Mm-hmm. And they knew that these are the number of students coming in. These are already in the system. These are going to come. And so they have to plan for it. So my view is very clear, and the Commission's view is very clearly, you cannot promise people higher education, free higher education, and then you come back and say, sorry, we don't have money. It's your responsibility to ensure that in terms of your planning, best case and worst case scenario, and what's in between, and then come back.
Okay, let's go to a quick ad break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation. We'll also be taking some of your tweets that you send using the hashtag Unfiltered as we have a conversation about student debt and also the cost of higher education. And welcome back to Unfiltered. Let's just quickly read some of your tweets before we say goodbye to our SABC 3 viewers. Nduduzo says, how are students supposed to pay those monies? Parents lost their jobs. There's a high rate of unemployment. Scrapping the debt will be a great solution. Deboho says, let government scrap that nonsensical student debt. If the state can spend lots of money on the useless Zondo Commission, why are they failing to invest in education? Sifiso says, if we have coal, gold, platinum, oil and gas, including nuclear, education should be free without debate. If our leaders are dealers and shareholders, we are in this problem. And Caroline says, it should not be a question. 500 billion rand was just blown away just like that. Okay, Bongani, just quickly, on the point that was raised by Commissioner Nissen, do you agree that it is about poor planning?
Of course, it's about poor planning. Hence, I said earlier that if you look at the policy uncertainty that has been taking place in the department, stems far back as 2017, whereas it was in the Hare report that they must stabilize policy. So 2017, 18, 19, 20, now it's 21, still there's no policy certainty. The department is saying it's going on a comprehensive review of student funding and it should report back in 3 months. That is a further testament that there is policy uncertainty. So if there's policy uncertainty, that is a direct result of poor planning. So now there's fiscal consolidation, there's austerity measures, and COVID is blamed. The COVID is a new development because some of the things that have been taking place even when a country was experiencing a boom. Even when increase in expenditure in higher education was taking place, it was taking place under a context that there is no policy stability in the department, no policy stability in cabinet. So clearly there is no planning, and each and every year around this time there's an interventionist approach where maybe the president or whoever has to come into the department to assist the department in order to stabilize. Because why? There's no policy certainty, and that is a result of why there's no planning.
Okay, so Bongani, the other point though is that the Hare Commission that you referred to also said that free fee higher education is not feasible. But I get you to respond to that just after this, and I'll get the Deputy Minister to respond to this as well. We say goodbye to our SABC 3 viewers, but the conversation continues on the SABC News channel 404. Okay, Bongani, the same report that you're citing, the Hare Commission, is the same report that also said that fee-free education is not feasible.
Exactly. So now the commission is that the recommendations, some of the recommendations that were made there, including what NSFAS currently use as an income threshold of 350, stems from the very same recommendation from that commission. We as students did reject generally or holistically that report on the basis that it incited what you have just stated now, which is income contingency loan. And that was a bone of our contention that we cannot have such a system taking place. Remember, as it was said earlier by one speaker, that the government has been able to bail out state-owned enterprises to a cumulative amount of 100 billion. So that tells you that the government has ability. But when it comes to student funding, free education, clearing of historical debt, the government does have ability, but what they do not have is incentive to do it. So what we lack here is incentive. So that report by Hare cannot be totally dismissed on the basis, as I said, which they also spoke about administrative efficiency, and that still is not happening. They spoke about an increase in spending, which is why we are here now, actually, because government is reducing spending because of austerity measures. Even the life that was lost was a direct consequence of austerity measures. Titombowen's pro-growth fiscal consolidation strategy that goes against any economic theory and logic is what the cabinet is busy implementing now. And clearly also to show that there is ability. They say the same 6.4 or 7 billion that was brought back to NSFAS. It was because of reprioritization to ensure that we stabilize NSFAS because of the shortfall that it experienced when the year began. And so after strikes, the government was able to maneuver and ensure that money is being brought back to the NSFAS coffers, even though holistically within the department there will be cuts. So it's an issue of incentive, not ability.
Deputy Minister, why has government failed to implement the Heha Commission's recommendations, including the part that said free fee at higher education is not feasible?
Well, look, firstly, what government made as a commitment was that we will fund students fee-free based on the income of their, of their households, which is up to 350,000. And government is going to meet that commitment towards those students. And that includes also first-time entrants. And therefore, we haven't, deviated from the commitment that government has made. And,
are you spending 1% of GDP on higher education?
Well, we haven't gotten to that level, and as I said, as a result of some of the fiscal pressures that we are confronted with. But I think what is crucial, and this shows from Sau's presentation, is that the recommendations of the commissions need not necessarily be taken holistically. They are recommendations which government has taken into consideration some of those recommendations, and those which we believe are feasible, we have gone on to implement them, and those we deemed not feasible, we have readjusted. And by the way, the Heha Commission was not the first commission set up to investigate on the feasibility of fee-free higher education. And in general, government is that fee-free higher education is going to be provided for, for students within a particular threshold. We could not have anticipated COVID-19, and as a result of that, more than 2.5 billion rand had to be spent, unplanned, unbudgeted for the extension, for instance, of the academic year, which made a huge dent on our fiscals.
Okay, Commissioner Nissan, just listening into what the Deputy Minister had to say there about the Commission's report, and also the attitude that it does not necessarily mean that a report that comes from a Commission has to be implemented. What's your take on that?
Well, the position is very clearly, there are two positions here. The first position is government has promised free education. And we need to adhere to that. And therefore, government and government departments should have made preparations for it and say, this is what's going to happen in the next few years. On the other hand, there's also those who can pay that should also be coming to the party. However, the people that apply to university, most of our people are from the poor and working class communities. And government has promised, and we need to keep government to that promise and say, you have said free education. Can we stick to that? Can you plan to that? Can you engage Treasury? Can you make sure that those institutions that need to come to the party do come to the party? And you do have, every year, when matriculants are applying to university or TVET college or other institutions for higher education, they do apply, and they do apply to NSFAS. NSFAS then have that, all the information, so which means that you should be planning for the year ahead. Yep. And not wait until they come and then you say, we don't have money. You know all the information beforehand. Whether it's NSFAS, with Education Department, Higher Education Department, you should know that. And so please plan and please prepare for the year ahead.
Okay, we go to a quick ad break. When we come back, we shift the focus of this conversation just a little bit in that the tool that is being used to try and put pressure on the state is a tool of protest action, which is nothing new to this country. However, though, that tool has also been met by deadly force coming from the police. That conversation just after this.
We have indirected government to find money and resources for your demands, because your demands are genuine demands as students. So definitely from today, government is going to announce, after engaging the African National Congress, because your demands are genuine, you must continue with your demands. You must not think about yourself as individuals, those who have. You must think about those who don't have. And you must make sure and understand that the struggle continues. Don't demobilize people, don't demobilize students. Ensure that you do your work and don't fight only at vets. Solidarity throughout the country, because your struggle is the same.
Well, on the back of what the Secretary General of the ANC had to say there, let's bring into the conversation that Rais Noorbai, who is the chairperson of the Wits Student Forum. So the argument there from the Secretary General, Rais, is don't only fight at Wits, but also go nationwide. But you go nationwide, and then there is also the police force that retaliates.
So we are in the midst of a national shutdown. The South African Union of Students has declared a national shutdown of 26 universities across the country. In taking out the shutdown, today, students from Wits, students from UJ, students from CJC were out in the streets of Braamfontein and were brutalized by the police. We were met by water cannons, we were met by tear gas and smoke bombs, and then students were shot with rubber bullets, despite the assertion of the SAPS that there were no rubber bullets used today. Rubber bullets were used today. And at least 4 students were arrested following protest action today. So we've been met with brutality immediately by the state the moment we've gone to the streets. It must be noted that last week Mtokozizi was murdered not with live ammunition, but with rubber bullets. These are the same rubber bullets that are being used against students protesting. These bullets are lethal and are being used by the South African police force against us. We are only protesting for free education. We are protesting peacefully. Last week, Wednesday, when we were gunned down by the police, our hands were in the air on Empire Road while they advanced on us. They shot us and then they pursued us down the road. They shot students in the back. And so we are meeting full brutality from the state for simply demanding free decolonized education. And I think that brings key tenets of our democracy into question and the right to peacefully protest into question as well.
Okay. Bongani, your take on that and your observation?
Our observation is that we have seen this play out before, that the police force is able to exercise its full might on striking students, but are unable to do the same on serious crime in South Africa. I mean, if you look at the crime statistics that are published annually, you'd find that serious crime is on the rise. That is murder, hijacking, rape, gender-based violence. They're unable to perform and show how strong they are. But when students go on the streets, then they'll come full force and they end up eventually even murdering students. Another unfortunate thing as well is that in South Africa, unfortunately, you cannot sit in a boardroom with the minister, deputy minister, DG, and whoever, and be able to sort issues out in the boardroom, and so that issues do not overflow on the streets. Every time you have to go to the streets, and then once you have been on the streets, then it's the ambulance effect. You know, the ambulance will never chase after a healthy person. So something has to happen for you to see an ambulance. So that is what we are currently seeing now. And that is why we are here now. Because when we engage behind closed doors with the ministry does not take us serious. Even when we present scientific facts as to why we need what we need, why we are demanding what we are demanding, the ministry, the government that claims and positions itself as a caring government does not take us serious. And when you go onto the streets, they unleash the police force that will show you who they are, more especially if you are a black body. They will want to exert their full force on you to a point where murder is committed by that force. And after that murder has been committed, it takes forever to apprehend the people that have actually conducted the murder. As we have seen, that it's only today we are hearing of the 4 police officers being arrested by IP. So you ask yourself, during the day of the murder and up to today, what has been happening? Because it's in full view. There's camera footage of who they are, in which vehicle they came in with, and all that. But our government has failed. Okay. But also, we are not surprised that the government will fail. We are not surprised that SABC will fail. I mean, the same minister of police came onto a national platform, a newsroom somewhere, and said he does not know what happens in his department. So if the whole minister, the political head of the department does not know, we do not expect the police on the ground to know how to treat protesters.
Commissioner Nissen, this is not the first time this issue is coming up. Even back in 2016, this is a point that has been made by the Commission around the heavy-handedness of the police. And this time around, you have somebody who has died, a bystander who has died from the brutal force, allegedly from the police, and they were set to appear in court on Wednesday.
Aldrin, let me start off by saying there's no need for the struggle to continue. You know, when I was in prison, my wife was in prison, and we're tortured. We never thought that 26 years after liberation, the struggle continues. There's no struggle that needs to continue. It needs government to take responsibility and make sure that whatever we fought for is adhered to and be realized, not in totality, because we know that nothing can happen overnight. But there's no need to say the struggle continues. There's no need for the struggle to continue. The people that we fought for and that we wanted the ruling party to make sure, let them implement and stop the corruption and make sure they continue. Let me come back to the issue about how the heavy-handedness. I never thought that in my day that I can face when police use rubber bullets to kill people. We fought against that. We fought against it. We were with tear gas. Even now, when I enter into a situation where people are confronted by the police, I always tell them, you know, this is not right. We never fought for the police to use whatever force against ordinary people. And that's why I'm saying to you now, Eldrin and 12 viewers and everybody, and it's particular to the Education Department, please do what is right and do not unleash any brutality on our people. And we are saying that even the United Nations have warned against rubber bullets. And so we don't want rubber bullets and one other thing else. All I'm saying, Andren, let us work all together and say, let us not say the struggle continues. There's no struggle to continue. Do what is right because you're in power and you know what to do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Deputy Minister of Higher Education, your quick view on the use of rubber bullets at protest action, especially here with the students.
Look, firstly, we condemn the use of lethal force against protesters. Both our minister and the Minister of Police will be meeting with the student leadership sometime this week so that we are able to, agree on some protocols. We fully respect the rights of students to protest, and over and above that, have kept our doors open to engage with the students. I personally spend hours on Saturday engaging with them, and we've indicated that our doors remain open for engagement so that we resolve this issue. We do not want to see any loss of life, and part of this engagement between the Minister of Police and our minister and with the student leadership is to make sure that we avoid all of these things. But what we also want to call upon, to the student leadership is that during protests, I mean, we've seen visuals of tires being burned, property being destroyed, and even in the past. And I'm not saying that this justifies the lethal use of force, but I think that peaceful protest is going to be very crucial moving forward. There's no need.
But what's your view on the use of rubber bullets, specifically rubber bullets?
No, we as I said, do not agree with any use of any lethal force, and if that includes rubber bullets, then they shouldn't be used.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Deputy Minister. Let me just quickly bring into this conversation as we conclude our conversation this evening, a colleague of mine, Offense Sitimo, who was outside in Pretoria earlier on today as students continue to protest. Offense, just quickly tell us where you were and what are the students saying?
Thank you very much, Aldrin. Well, today I was actually at the University of Pretoria, where most of the students were actually saying that it was the start of the academic year. And unfortunately, NSFAS had not concluded some of their arrangement with the students. Some of them were saying they had been defunded in the middle of last year. And this year, when they came to register, they were told that there is a historic debt that actually prevents them from being fully registered with the institution. So it would be a worst case scenario would be someone coming from like Durban or Eastern Cape, finding themselves in Pretoria, expecting to be accommodated, to be fed, and also to be given, access to classroom and to books and everything. But the moment they get here, they're told that there's restrictions on the budget of NSFAS, and they can only be given so much, and they would exclude stuff like accommodation, which would leave someone from a poor background stranded. So they were saying that a lot needs to be done in terms of administration at NSFAS, as the incompetence within the administration at NSFAS leaves them at the bitter end, where they are at the receiving end, where you receive a letter saying that you were supposed to get funding for admission to res and books and everything, but then you get shortchanged on what was actually offered and on the contract that you actually have with NSFAS. That's in the gist what they were saying.
What I noticed with your last crossing as well is that it was late in the evening. Are the students saying that they will be outside the university throughout the evening?
Well, the meeting today was meant to actually try and find out the mandate from the students as to a way forward. As I mentioned earlier, that the academic year had begun, and some people found themselves in limbo in terms of support from NSFAS. So some of the suggestions they were making was that because there is a level 1 lockdown, there's literally no one on campus. Everything is online. So they were saying they need an online presence where they can push this hashtag Asina Mali campaign to actually say that they should actually be allowed to pursue their studies despite the historic debt which is left, because some were defunded in the middle of the year last year. And they were also saying that they also need accommodation as well. And, that the contract that they have with NSFAS should actually be honored.
Have the students dispersed now?
Yes, I can safely say that the students have dispersed. They were supposed to be there until about 8:30.
Okay, then. Thank you so much for your time, Offenses Timore. Giving us an update on the student protests and outside the University of Pretoria. We've come to the end of today's show. Thank you so much for choosing Unfiltered with me, Aldrin St-Pierre. From me and the rest of the team, Since let's see who's standing by. Okay, no. I thought the old young man is standing by, but he's not here as yet. But thank you so much for choosing us. Bye-bye. Enjoy the rest of the evening.